Michael Gianaris is the Deputy Majority Leader of the State Senate with a big say over what happens in Albany this year. And, you know, I wanted to start talking about serious things, but my producer put this idea in my head. I cannot get out of it. So she told me that you passed a bill to come up with a day to represent the Force be with you. It's May the 4th.
May 4th, that's right.
May the 4th be
Yes.
with you. Star Wars, May the 4th be with you. So I want to know, you who are one of the serious lawmakers I know, what was in your mind that you should do a Star Wars bill?
There's a group of us in the Senate who are Star Wars buffs.
Are you a Star Wars buff?
Oh, yeah, big time. Big
Seriously?
time. Yeah, absolutely.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, that's Star Trek.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry.
But
so how did this come about?
I mean, one of the things I enjoyed the most in terms of the perks of this office is I once got tweeted at by Mark Hamill. And he says, the Force is strong with this one. They had my picture up there. So that was fun. What happened was there's actually a bipartisan group of us in the Senate.
Seriously?
Yeah, who chatted.
There are Republicans who are Star Wars people?
Yeah. And so we said, let's have some fun and do a resolution in honor of Star Wars Day. So
But May the 4th be with you?
Yes. Well, what's interesting is May 4th is Star Wars Day. But we were not done with the budget last year in time. And so we didn't want to do this while we were still negotiating the budget.
I get that.
Important things are happening. So we delayed it until I think it was May 19th. But we got it done. We had a couple of stormtroopers in the chamber. And it was fun.
So
we had fun and
are
it
you
brought
going to
people
do it
together.
again this year, or?
I think we had our fun with it.
But still, I think that was really
it's
fun.
interesting. And at a time when we're all very divided politically, it was a moment of levity, and it brought together Republicans and Democrats. A couple of my colleagues brought lightsabers into the chamber, and so it was a fun moment.
So now to get to the serious stuff, the legislature is going to be asked to raise taxes on the rich and on corporations in order to fund the city budget. It's an election year for everybody but yourself because you're retiring, but it's an election year for the governor. She says no new taxes. Where do you see this landing, and whether or not, you know, there's going to be some wiggle room so that there can be some new financial benefit for New York City?
Well, I hope there is some wiggle room. What's interesting is both the Senate and the Assembly, year after year now, have put in our budget proposals an effort to increase taxes on the very wealthy to fund some of these important programs that would help make the city more affordable.
But there's already a tax on the rich.
Well, they pay taxes.
No, but there's already, isn't there like a small millionaire's tax?
Yes, there is. But if you look at how much is paid in taxes by the very wealthy and how much need there is from people who are not very wealthy, and when you talk about the affordability crisis being so acute right now, we're not looking to do this just for fun. We're looking to do this to fund universal child care or free and more affordable mass transit or more affordable housing. These are real things to make life more affordable for most New Yorkers. And a lot of people, when we talk about this, say, well, people will flee New York. No, they won't. We have more millionaires today than before we did the bump you're talking about. But let me just make this point, Marcia. The people who are leaving New York are the working people who can't afford to pay their rent. So it's not the wealthy that are fleeing. It's people who are in need that are leaving.
But what are the politics of that, given the fact that the governor is running for re-election? And do you think that she's going to keep that pledge of no new taxes, or did it get easier because she's going to run against Bruce Blakeman instead of Elise Stefanik?
Well, look, she's held this line for a couple of years now. This has been not a new dynamic. What's new is that we have a mayor that's pushing with us to get this done. That's going to be the result of negotiations over the next month and a half before the budget's due. But you know what's made this year interesting is the governor budget office has said that we have more money than we thought we were going to have, and so we're in a place where we can fund some of these programs without necessarily going all in on the tax question. So we'll see. It's a conversation that will be ongoing for several weeks.
But also, what about taxing corporations? I know that the mayor makes a point that he wants the base tax to be the same as New Jersey. But in New York City, if you add the base tax plus the city corporation tax, plus the taxes that corporations pay to fund the MTA, the mobility tax, it doubles the tax that you pay in New Jersey. And is that a factor in worrying about whether corporations can very easily move, and would they?
It is a factor, but we're not even up to that level of detail yet. I mean, the governor's saying no taxes, period. We're trying to say let's at least open our minds to figuring out how to raise more revenue for the state. And so that tension has to be, if we can agree that we're looking to raise money, then we could figure out where to get it from specifically. Ultimately, it's the people who have money that would be paying more to deal with any additional revenue that we raise. So whether that's corporate or income, I think there's flexibility on that front, but we have to first cross the threshold of agreeing that we want to raise revenue.
But you also have a situation where the mayor makes the point that New York City sends a lot more money in tax revenue to Albany than it gets back. I think he says we send 54% of the revenue and we get back 40-something. Mm-hmm. So is there a way to carve out more money for New York City without shortchanging the other parts of the state in a gubernatorial election year?
First of all, he's correct, and I think everyone will admit that that the money flows from New York City to the rest of the state at this point in terms of the state budget. But we have to figure out how to do it. Now, what's interesting is there was this thing years ago called AIM, Aid to Municipalities, where the state provided money to the local governments around the state. New York City was included in that. It got its share of state money. And then it went away during a budget crisis several years ago entirely. It has now been restored, but not for New York City.
Right.
So every other local government around the state gets this state aid. New York City does not. So I think there's an argument to be made, certainly, that the policy, the budget policy of the state now is unfair to New York City in that respect.
But here's the question. If you have to take more money to give to New York City, what happens to the localities that are going to be shortchanged?
Well, I don't think they should be shortchanged. I think we should find additional resources, either because the budget is flush, as the governor suggests, or because we find revenue elsewhere to add money for New York City without taking away from anywhere else.
I'm interested about the politics of this gubernatorial year and the fact that originally you thought it was going to be Elise Stefanik that she was going to be running against, which some people think would have been a more difficult road to hoe than Bruce Blakeman, who's aligned himself with Donald Trump. So does that give her a little bit more wiggle room to do things because she's running against somebody who's not high in the polls at the present time?
The governor's had a very good political few months. Not only that, she initially had a primary. That's gone away now, so she's clear to November when she will face what by most accounts is a weaker opponent in Bruce Blakeman. So I think she's doing great politically over the last several months. She's put her ducks in a row. Her numbers are higher than they've been, I think, since she's been governor. So by all accounts, she's on a good path towards re-election.
But doesn't that give her a little bit of flexibility in terms of taxes?
I think it does, but you have to ask her how she views herself. And look, in politics, you always worry about an opponent, whether they look serious or not. There's a long list of unserious people who have been elected. Take a look at the White House, for one. So you never want to take anything for granted. And I think she'd be wise to pay attention to that. But I actually think that raising taxes on the wealthiest is a politically popular position. So all this talk of we don't want to raise taxes in an election year, I get why you don't want to raise taxes on working people or make life less affordable for the middle class and working class here in New York. But when you're talking about the wealthy, it's actually a popular position across party lines.
What do you think of her choice of Adrienne Adams as a running mate?
I like Adrienne Adams. She's from Queens, so a little bit of personal pride there. I think she's a very capable public servant, and I think she'll do just fine.
Do you think that she's going to add a lot to the ticket upstate?
Well, she's not from upstate, but I do think there's something historic about this ticket. It's the first time.
Two moms.
Two moms. I mean, Governor Hochul was the first mom ever to be governor, the first woman ever to be governor. And now you have an opportunity for the entire ticket to be moms and women, and I think that history should help.
They're running against two non-moms.
Which is more typical. I mean, that's been happening throughout all time, right? So the opportunity to do something different like that, I'm proud as a Democrat that that's the case. Obviously, in the Senate, we crossed that line a long time ago. We made Andrea Stewart-Cousins the first woman to lead the legislature in New York's history. We have Tish James in the Attorney General's office. So the Democrats are doing okay.
Women power.
Yes, as it should be.
All right, we're going to have to leave it right there for now. Up next, we talked about the wacky world of politics in New York with J.C. Polanco and O'Brien Murray. We are back with Queens Senator Michael Gianaris, and I want to talk to you about the reapportionment or the redistricting of Nicole Malliotakis' seat. Its district was Staten Island, but now the new lines would be Staten Island, parts of Staten Island, and the Lower East Side. She's just gone to Supreme Court saying she wants an emergency ruling by the Supreme Court because otherwise there's going to be chaos in the congressional races, given the fact that the petitions have to be submitted by February 24th. Your take on that, and do you think that she's going to prevail in her challenges?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I don't know what role the Supreme Court has here. The claims in the initial lawsuit were based on New York law and the New York Constitution.
And racial disparities.
Correct. So I'm not sure what jurisdiction the Supreme Court would have over that, but be that as it may, even the state court process is confused. There was a decision that came out that said the lines have to be redrawn. They set a deadline of February 6th for that to happen. Obviously, we're past that now. The appeals process is still bouncing around. They went to the Court of Appeals, the court sent it back. So it's
slow.
It's slow. It's winding its way through the process, slower than would be necessary to meet the political calendar. Petitions begin in less than 2 weeks. And so things are a little bit murky right now, but I'm not sure even the state process would necessarily lead to new lines. We don't know where this will ultimately end up once the appeals are exhausted.
So I guess the question is, like, if they actually change her district, it may change who runs against her. I mean, there's some talk that Dan Goldman may decide to run against her instead of running in his present district.
We don't know what it means if the lines get redrawn, because you can't just change one district. If you're changing one, you're taking from somewhere else. That means the second district is changed. It could have a cascading effect over several districts in the area. And so we just...
Sounds like a mess.
It is a mess. And it's unfortunate that the process is playing out so deep into the political year. So we don't know. We don't know. I mean, I guess there's a possibility that a court can delay congressional primaries. It's not be the first time that that's happened as a result of lines being late. But we can't do much other than wait for the appeals process to play out and then do what the courts order us to do.
So in other words, if they delay the primary process, they'd have to delay it because it could affect more than just one district.
It would inevitably affect more than one, because if you're changing a line or taking a part of that district away or adding to that district, it's coming from somewhere else or going to somewhere else. And so that would have a cascading effect through the whole map.
I want to talk to you about the Rent Guidelines Board. You've introduced legislation to change the way that people are appointed to the Rent Guidelines Board. Right now, they're mayoral appointees. You think the city council should be involved?
Well, I did think that.
You don't think it anymore?
Under the previous administration. Well, what was interesting is up until this year, the notion was that because the previous administration was in league with real estate developers, that they weren't adequately representing the tenants, who are millions of people here in the city. And so the idea was to give the city council a little bit more oversight over the appointment process. You have a very different mayor now who has a different point of view.
So you don't think you need that anymore?
I think we're just keeping it on the shelf to see how things play out and how this administration handles the Rent Guidelines Board, and we could decide in the coming months whether we need to do anything with that or not.
Another thing that you've been a champion of is free buses. You were one of the people who proposed the free bus pilot program that the MTA ran. Now there seems to be some resistance on the part of the MTA. What's your take on that?
First of all, I'm a fan of Gianaris. I've known him a long time, and I think he's one of the more effective MTA heads we've had. I disagree with him on this issue, and I think what it comes down to is bureaucratic inertia. I think the policy heads within the MTA have their own ideas about how to do things. This was never one of them, and there's some bureaucratic resistance to a new and different idea like this. But we tried it. It was wildly successful. Ridership was up. People were getting out of their cars. Assaults on drivers went down.
They argued there was no new riders. It was mostly the same old riders.
That's false. That's demonstrably false by their own numbers. I think what they would say is it's not as much as they would have liked to have seen, but there's no question that there were new riders, and there were new riders that were coming out of their cars and getting into mass transit, which is what we want. And then from a philosophical point of view, I look at mass transit as a public good. And we don't charge people for things that are important public goods all the time. Like if you call the fire department because your house is on fire and they come put out, you don't write them a check when they're leaving, because that's something that's important for everybody. Mass transit is the lifeblood of the city. And so I similarly think we don't need to have a pay-as-you-go model for something that's critical to the success of the city.
So what about the mayor's idea to try a free bus pilot for the World Cup?
I think it's a great idea. Anytime we can implement an experiment with free buses, I believe that you'll see that the data will show how successful it is, which will then add momentum to doing it on a bigger scale. That's what we did with the pilot program we enacted. So I'm wholly supportive of that.
I want to talk to you now about anti-Semitism. I know that there's been a number of bills that have been submitted both in the city and in the state to establish buffer zones around houses of worship, not only synagogues, but churches and schools and things like that. But there's a dispute about how big the buffer zone should be. The state bill says 25 feet. The city council bill says 100 feet. What's the answer?
Well, I would say 25 feet. That's what the state bill
But I mean,
says.
it's obviously going to be a negotiation.
The important thing is to do something. This is a very important issue. Increases anti-Semitism are unacceptable in the city or anywhere else. And if we can provide some additional protection by continuing to honor the First Amendment, let people protest, but just keep them at a safe distance so no one feels under threat as they're going to worship, I think that would be an important step we could take. And whether it's 25 feet, 100 feet, 50 feet, we can figure out the details, but we have to do something.
What about changing what the state accepts as the definition of anti-Semitism? The mayor of the city of New York did an executive order, the former mayor, to recognize the Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition, which is basically anything that's anti-Israel could be called anti-Semitism. And there's a bill in the state that would do that same thing. How do you fall on that one?
Well, we're talking to our colleagues about it. I think it's not as simple as it appears at first look. Right? There's a lot of geopolitical considerations beyond just straight anti-Semitism. I do believe people can be critical of the government of a country without it necessarily being deemed discriminatory against the people who hold a particular religious belief. And so if we could find a way to define it that allows for that freedom of discussion and freedom of opinion, that's one thing. But if we're going to say if you are critical of the actions of a government that therefore you're anti-Semitic, I don't believe that's appropriate. So
you have decided to retire after a gazillion years in Albany. Why? Because it's been a gazillion years. I've been there a long time. This is my 26th year in public office. I have a 2-year-old at home now. I have a 92-year-old mother across the street. I have an 11-year-old at home. There's a lot of desire on my part to be home more, spending half the week in Albany for so many years. I just really don't want to blink my eyes. And my youngest is a teenager, and I missed her growing up. And I'm young enough now, I still can have another chapter in my career, but I think this one has reached its conclusion, and it's the right time. Andrea Stewart-Cousins and I, we embarked on this project over a decade ago to make the Senate Democratic, remake the Democratic Conference, establish a majority that hopefully can live on without us in perpetuity. And right now we have the largest majority the state has ever seen from either party. We have great colleagues serving there in the Senate. You were there when it wasn't the case, that when the Democratic Conference was a bit of an embarrassment, and that's being generous to them. But now we, I think, are an exemplar of responsible government and stability, and I feel like we've done that. We've accomplished it. My colleagues are ready to go into the future. They can carry on just fine. You think you're going to miss it? I'll miss certain parts of it for sure. I've got great friendships amongst senators and staff and people up there. Hopefully I'll be able to stay in touch, and the ability to do good, which is why I got into this in the first place. I'll miss the ability to do that, but hopefully I'll find something to do that allows that work to continue. I have a feeling that you will. I just have a question. Who's going to replace you? There'll be a campaign. One of the reasons the announcement was timed the way it was is because petitions are still a week away, so anyone has the opportunity to decide to run, circulate petitions, get on the ballot, and let the voters decide. It's not for me to decide who replaces me. My last question has to do with Gateway and the ongoing battle of getting the president to free up funds. I wonder how you feel about what New York State, if anything, can do to try to support that. I know the state has invested a lot of its own money in Gateway, and the concern is really that as this fight continues, the state has to still shell out money for security for the site, but also because all those cranes are rented, and the state still has to pay that money. And it's coming out of the pocket of state government, of taxpayers in New York. And I wonder, what can be done? This is another example of the incredibly punitive approach the president is taking towards New York. By all accounts, this is just a punishment against a blue state that whose policies he doesn't like. In the meantime, he's hurting the economy
of New York and the budget of the state. It's not, he's not, this is an economic center of the world, New York. And so you're doing damage, not just to political people you don't like, you're doing damage to the economy, which then has a cascading effect on the region and on the nation. So hopefully it gets worked out because we desperately need it.
Well, if the state would just agree to call Penn Station Trump Penn Station, you might get the money.
You see what I'm talking about, Marcia. You see where this is going. So it's obviously there's no room for shakedowns like that for an issue as important as this. So again, hopefully it gets worked out before too long.
Senator Michael Gianaris, thank you for joining me, and thank you at home for joining me as well.